Hi, welcome back to my channel. This book review is for the Orphanage Girls Reunited. Now, this is a book by Mary Wood, which is the second book in the Orphanage Girls series. Now, due to time constraints, I wasn't able to read the first book, but I will be reading book one before I read book two. In fact, just to let you know what it is, it's the first book is called The Orphanage Girls. So I'm going to save that cover and put it in my want to read on Goodreads. So I will bring that cover up to you now so that I can encourage you to read that book before you read this one. But let me tell you about this book. When I started this book, I met Ellen. Ellen was about 12 years of age, maybe 11 or 12 years of age. And her father had rescued her from an orphanage. But the thing is, he's the reason she went in the orphanage in the first place. She was an illegitimate daughter to him, and when he married his wife rejected her, and Ellen had to go into the orphanage. Now he's a widower, at least at that time, and so he brings Ellen back home. But it doesn't last for Ellen. In fact, while Ellen was living in that home, the two girls that she was closest to were Ruth and Amy. Now, Amy, we don't meet in this book. I would imagine when I read book one that I'll meet Amy, and then I'm hoping that we'll meet Amy again in book three. But in this book, we start off with Ellen and her story. And her story was tragic. I kept looking for hope. I kept reaching for hope. But all I saw was pain and loss that Ellen experienced at her tender age. Very tender age. Well, she ends up with her grandmother. And at first, her grandmother is cold and unfeeling. But fortunately, their relationship grows, and it grows rather quickly. And that's a blessing, because what Ellen experienced was more tragedy than any young person should have to experience in their life. In fact, Ellen experienced assault while she was in the orphanage, and that tragedy didn't leave her and made a huge impact on what we learn in the pages of this book, her mental health. Now, this book takes place in the early 1900s, and hysteria was the general diagnosis, I guess I'll use that word, for any emotional ailment. And if someone was diagnosed, or a country doctor said that they had hysteria, then they were pretty much consigned to an asylum. Fortunately, Ellen didn't have to go down that road. Close to it, but she didn't have to go down that road. But there was a point, and this is reaching deeper into the book, but there was a point when Ellen had to get help. And this help actually shaped her goals for the future. Now, all while Ellen is experiencing the loss that she's experiencing, and it was one loss after another, one of those biggest losses was not seeing Ruth again and Amy. But Ruth, there was something very special. Now, what was special about Ruth? Well, at one point, before Ellen is foisted off onto her grandmother, she met a woman and a little boy. And the woman, when she looked at this woman, the woman had a bearing or a resemblance. And it kept making her think that, boy, does she look like Ruth. Okay? We don't ever see that woman again in this book. And I'm not giving you any spoilers, but that was something that was floating back there for Ellen. Well, fast forward a year or two, and Ellen spots Ruth's name in a newspaper. Now, remember I said Ellen's life was beset by tragedy. Well, with Ruth, she landed on her feet. In fact, she became a well-known actress and was performing in theater productions, and therefore her name was in the paper. So she's living in London. Ellen is living in the country with her grandmother. They're about to move into something called, which they will be calling Rose Cottage. And now Ellen gets the chance to meet Ruth. And this is almost like a part 3 or a part 4 of this very long and tragic story. So it's now, I think I wrote, somewhere I read that World War II was on the horizon, but I believe it's World War I. But the war was on the horizon. I have to check my time frame before I solidify this written review. And the Red Cross was being formed. And Ellen and Ruth had the opportunity to do what they could do for the war by joining the Red Cross. This means that Ellen would have to leave her grandmother and Ruth would have to leave her job as an actress. But guess what? The two sisters would be together. And that's where you see their relationship, their bond as friends, their bond as sisters getting stronger and stronger. And thankfully, that's the case because of all the sadness and the tragedy and the heartbreak that happened over and over again in this book. Now, like I said, it's a trilogy. And I do think I have fantastic fiction loaded. I do. So The Orphanage Girls was book 1, and the Orphanage Girls Reunited is this book. But when I look at fantasticfiction.com, it says The Orphanage Girls Comes Home will be out in 2023, and it'll be May, so it'll be a minute. And when I did have to look ahead because I love series so much. When I look ahead to The Orphanage Girls Come Home, it is Amy's story. Okay? So now I am sure that at some point, Amy, Ruth, and Ellen will all be reunited. So I know that I've talked a wee bit about book 1, which I haven't read, and a wee book about book 3, which won't be out till next year. But this book, number 2, should give you enough feedback for you to check this out. Now, if you have Scribd or Audible, you can get these books, 1 and 2, and then put number 3 on your radar. As a matter of fact, I did put number 3 on my radar already on Goodreads. So that is it for this book review. I want to thank you for watching, and I will be back with more. Bye-bye.